Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Monday, June 6th, West Fargo City Commission meeting. Our first order of business is I'd ask that you please join me for a pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. Commissioners, do you have any amendments or suggestions?
Make motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes of May 16th, 2022. They are on pages 3 through 5 in the packet. Are there any amendments or changes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George moves, Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of May 16th, 2022. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Before we go any further, I'd ask everybody to silence their phones with the exception of our emergency personnel that are in the room, so we don't have those interruptions. I neglected to mention that Mr. Jurdevig, Commissioner Jurdevig, is not with us this evening. He tested positive for you-know-what earlier in the day. Item E is the building permits. That is in pages 6 through 11. It has been distributed. Commissioners, do you have any questions or suggestions?
Make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the building permits, pages 6 through 11, as distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is the consent agenda. We have items A through O, pages starting on page 12 and ending on page 65. Commissioners, anything on the consent agenda that you'd like to discuss?
I move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda, items A through O and pages 12 through 65. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on, we are now in the regular agenda. Item number 1 is a recommendation to appoint Dan Hanson as West Fargo City Engineer effective June 20th, 2022, contingent upon successful results of his pre-employment screenings. That's page 66 in the packet. Mrs. Fisk.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. We're very proud tonight to request for you to appoint Dan Hanson effective June 20th. All of his pre-employment screenings have been completed and everything was perfect, so our request is to make that appointment, please. And I would have him come up here to say hello.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Good evening, Mr. Hanson. Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. I got to get used to saying this now, right? Commissioner
Bernie's fine.
Artis and commissioners. Frankly, I'm honored to be here and to be given the challenge of becoming the next city engineer for the city of West Fargo. I've worked with staff and I've got hopefully a lot of experience that I can bring to the position. And I think the culture of West Fargo, I think I'm going to fit in very well with. And I honestly, I can't wait to start and help move progressively forward with the city of West Fargo.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Need a motion?
This is an actionable item, yes.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. It has been moved to appoint Dan Hanson as the West Fargo City Engineer effective June 20th, 2022. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Welcome. Congratulations. Item 2 on the regular agenda is the screening on the south side of City Hall parking lot. We have Mr. Dwayne Hanson, former city commissioner. Mr. Hanson.
Good evening. I'll go with Commission
Bernie,
President.
it's fine.
I was gonna call you Mr. Mayor, but, Commission President, Commissioners, my name is Dwayne Hanson. I live at 407 7th Street East, right next door. I'm here tonight to talk to you about that row of bushes that kind of borders the city parking lot and my property. A little history on that. When we first moved there, they had a row of Russian olive trees. If you're familiar with them, they're not the very best thing there. They were there for a long time. The city took them out and planted what was there today. That was fine to start with. The first winter though, 2 of those were damaged by the snow removal, which happens. They were replaced but a couple times, but they never really grew back, as you can kind of see by the pictures that I sent you. There's also 2 or 3 dead ones now at the end of the row. Those trees catch a lot of garbage. They're just not really good, very good to look at. Also in 2020, I don't know how many of you remember this, but somebody tried to set them on fire. Actually, they did set them on fire. At the end of the sidewalk. So what I'm asking and proposing is that we put in some fencing, something similar to what you've got around the garbage dumpster out there, down my way. I'm not sure if Ryan next door, now that's the only place there's parking lot, it's just from me and then to Ryan's place. He works for the city, he's a police officer. I'm not sure I haven't talked to him about that because I don't know where you guys are at with all this. So that's what I'm asking for. We just want things to look good, you guys. I mean, my wife and I take a lot of pride in our property and we want to try to make it look nice. And those bushes, they don't look nice, they're out of control. So that's all I'm asking for. I don't want to take a lot of your time. I know you got a busy agenda. I appreciate you putting me on the agenda. Is there any questions I can answer, anything?
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Questions?
How far, Dwayne, down would this fence go?
To where those bushes end, Mark. That's the end of my property.
Okay, and then we'd have to work with the other owners.
If he wants them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. On the trees, where his row of tree bushes start, they set back a little bit. So it's a different type. It's not, it doesn't run on the same line. So we'd have to, take a look at that and see, what everybody's thinking about on that. I understand it's not in this year's budget, you guys, but I know next year's budget's coming around pretty soon, so, if we could take a look at that, I know we'd appreciate it. And if it'd be done, you wouldn't have to worry about planting anything forever,
Additional questions of Mr. Hanson?
No,
Mr. Hanson, could we defer this to the next meeting?
Oh, of course.
In the sense that we visit with your neighbor?
I did not expect
Yeah, okay.
any answers, Brett.
I think I'm sorry, Mayor. I think we just want to see if we can get the other neighbors to
If they're fine with,
continue.
I can try to reach him, or I can find out from you what his schedule's like, and then I know he's on 12-hour shifts, and I don't wanna be bothered, the man when he's trying to sleep, so you and I can maybe talk about that, or I can call up here and find out, okay? So I can give him a call, okay?
I feel like we'd need some pricing too on what this would cost, so.
I'm sorry, man?
A pricing.
Yep, absolutely.
So should we make a motion to table it or just move forward with the staff to look at what to do?
Mrs. Fisk, what direction would you like to take this? It's gonna fall on your shoulders.
At this point, if Mr. Hanson is going to talk to his neighbor, I believe we should get pricing on the cost once we find out how many of the neighbors along that row actually want fencing, and then we'll bring that back to you at the next meeting.
The only one that has parking lot is gonna be just me and Ryan. I mean, once we get over to Bob's, then it's just grass, and there's no parking lots or there's people coming and going, so I think it's just gonna be me and Ryan.
Can we ask of you and your designated appointee that report back by the next meeting, please?
Yes, I will. I'll work with Dwayne and then
I'll let
get
you
back
know
to you.
what I find out from Ryan, and then we can go from there.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
All right, very good. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Item number 3 is the expansion of the campground facilities at the Red River Valley Fairgrounds. We have with us this evening Mr. Cody Cashman, the Executive Director of the Red River Valley Fairgrounds. Welcome.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna try to steer here. All right. Well, first off, thanks for having me. This is my first time in front of you guys, so I appreciate you meeting with me. So I kind of put a quick presentation together to kind of go over what the ask is, and I've been working with some of your staff who've been wonderful to deal with on really what to do, because we kind of have some gray area here that the fairground needs some guidance, and I think West Fargo city staff maybe needs some guidance on this as well, so we can kind of figure out what direction to go. But essentially the ask, or the objective here that we're going for is the River Life Fair Association desires to expand our campground facility. At the fairgrounds, if you are familiar with the fairgrounds, you know we have a campgrounds, we have 78 spots. Those 78 spots are full right now, and they are full usually as soon as we open, and until we ask people to leave, they are full, and people would love to stay there year-round, but obviously the weather will not allow that, so we don't. We're requesting the city of West Fargo to allow the city staff to work with us on ordinance amendments. And you know, I'm not real good with the language here, so I think we have some folks over here that know a lot more about that stuff than I do, but essentially the language isn't, it just doesn't exist. So essentially that's what we're going for, is to change it so that the fair can bring a request to the Planning and Zoning Commission for their consideration. So like I said, we have 78 spaces. How this kind of all started was the county commissioners wanted to know if we were interested in expanding our campgrounds. Of course we are. It's a huge profit center for the fair. We make a ton of money on our campgrounds. It helps us go year round. They asked if we were interested. The answer, of course, was yes, but we are not paying for it. We do not have money to spend. And just so you know, the price tag on this expansion of 130 sites is about $3.5 million. So I say all that so you guys kind of know the scope. If we were to receive the campgrounds, if we were able to do all of this, the new 130 spots, we do believe would be filled. We turn away people daily, and we turn away companies daily that want to bring 5 or 6 different campers, which is a good problem for us. But the fact is that we could be making a lot more, upwards of 500,000. That number is the most I think we would get, so we're clear. And I think the minimum would probably be about 350,000 more additional income with this. So the following page, let me try it this way. Following page kind of has an example of what that would look like. And I'm kind of excited about it. My wife actually did most of this drawing. She's a civil engineer, and then we had another company, MBN, work on the rest of it. And this isn't exactly what it would look like, but more or less the idea would be to have 2 bathhouses and some pavilions and some recreational things. So that's the goal. And it really is going to come down to, obviously, you folks and a lot more other steps, but what the county wants to pay for as well is going to be a huge part of this. At the end of the day, if they decide we're not doing this or they're not funding it, it will not happen. So here's some of the existing infrastructure. So if you're not familiar with the grounds, this is the location of what we're talking about. Essentially, the campgrounds run right along West Fargo, right along that ditch. And if you're familiar, you know exactly kind of right what I'm talking about. Right behind the campgrounds is wasted land we don't do anything with, would fit perfectly for an expansion of the campgrounds. And then we're looking directly south of that as well, which we call parking lot C, essentially. And then as far as the infrastructure goes, luckily, Moore Engineering just finished our very large infrastructure plan. We're a small city in itself, and they'll tell you that. We have the old infrastructure to prove that. And so they did a large future plan for us on our entire fairgrounds and a little bit of Bonanzaville, so we can kind of figure out exactly what we need. And so I kind of thought it was relevant to share with you some of our future plans. Not quite all of them, obviously, because it's a 200-some page document, but I thought it'd be relevant to kind of just give you an overlay of the fairgrounds. Now, I spend all the time looking at this, at the map, and I could tell you every acreage and all that kind of fun stuff. But essentially, right here is the existing campgrounds, and this, can you see what I'm, okay. And then right here is behind the campgrounds that we're talking about, right along this ditch. That's where we're looking at expanding, and then also this area right here, okay? And what you see here is a stormwater ponds and infrastructure of the future for the fairgrounds. And essentially, no matter what we do at the fairgrounds or what is done with the fairgrounds, these ponds are essentially needed for expansion, development, what have you. So there's 5, maybe I'm wrong, yep, 5, there's 6. 6 ponds that were put in here. The big one is number 1 that we're looking at, and the interesting thing about that spot for that retention pond is we could, kind of change the size of that, but also have it as a fishing pond and an amenity for the campgrounds and really for Cass County, essentially is the goal. So that's just kind of one example. If you follow the pink, that whole area, if we were decided to develop all of that, turn all that concrete, we would need a retention pond that size, and so on and so forth. This is a future plan of about 30 years, 25 to 30 years that we've been working on with more. They've been out there a lot. They've been working on this for a long time. And so when I go forward with this, you're going to see each section kind of broken down. And I'm just going to kind of quickly go over some of our ideas of maybe some of the future development spots. And I know I've talked with Bernie and Tina about some of my wild ideas that maybe we should look at for the future that might be a little pie in the sky ideas. But essentially, everything that we did with this plan would set us up for a very bright future in terms of infrastructure, because that's something that we really lack. And while I'm on this page, I'm not sure if you all are aware of this or not, but our pipe, our sewer pipe, because obviously we run off the city sewer and water. Now the city sewer that runs from the Cass County building that's right here, it actually runs straight across our property and goes into Bonanzaville as well. And that pipe is just for the fair and just for Bonanzaville. And I think it was put in the 60s. So as you can imagine, my fear for infrastructure of the clay pipe causing an issue, and the fair needs to figure out what we're going to do with that. And so long-term strategic planning for us in terms of infrastructure, I know that's going to happen during the fair, and I really don't want it to. And so, or Big Iron, or God forbid, during a big event. So that's kind of another reason we had this done. It's just another step forward. We're going to really push the infrastructure plan so we can make sure that we're doing the right thing. Obviously it's on our property. We know we're responsible for it, so we're not coming to the city for that. But we're just so you guys know, it's on our radar. We know it's a thing that could happen. It's clay pipe. It's old. We have not televised it yet. To televise our sewer system is going to cost over $88,000 from what I'm told, just to take a look. So we don't have that kind of cash. But we are looking to secure some funding maybe from the county to see if they would help us with that, because I think they put it in the 60s. I say that so you guys understand that's kind of our infrastructure. It's old. Everything on the fairgrounds is old. If you've been there, you know that. And we're working really hard to improve that. When they hired me, they decided, hey, let's go and try to improve and grow and go. So I say all that so you kind of can see the next sections that we're working on. This is right off of Main Avenue. Just north, there's the idea of putting a retention pond there. Strategically speaking, I don't like that location, but that essentially is where they're saying it should be. It doesn't mean we can't move it, okay? This area right now, we are working on currently. We took out fence. We're trying to grow our parking lot. We're trying to create a new North Main Avenue right here, actually where my cursor is. And so we already paved that. That's going to be a new location. Not new, but we're changing the way you enter the fairgrounds. Right now, we're terrible when it comes to ADA. It's awful. If you're in a wheelchair, the fairgrounds is not a great location for you. And so we're trying to change that. And so that being said, now handicap will be able to park right up to it and get right onto the pavement is the goal. And so we did that. As far as future growth of this area, it could be a million things. But right now, that's what we're doing. We're using that area for that. And then obviously we're going to upgrade this facility with the sewer. Everything on our grounds needs re-updated. Sewer, water, it's just not quite to where it needs to be. So this is just a big parking lot, and as you guys are probably familiar, West Fargo, if you're familiar with the large area where West Fargo dumps all their snow, the city of West Fargo, we have an agreement. You guys dump your snow there. Essentially down the road, we'll put a pond there. And if you looked at it in May, there was a pond there. So essentially that's all that is right now, but the idea is to set that area up for future development if the fairgrounds so choose, or developer wanted to purchase the land. We're going to set it up for success, essentially. And then this is the back area of the fairgrounds. This is my least favorite area of the fairgrounds because it's so underutilized. The idea here is to put a nice big pond in. I love that location. I actually picked that location. The idea is to turn this into kind of a recreational area for the area. Pond, I'd like to get DNR involved so we can actually have a year-round facility there, possibly some archery and some more outdoorsy things for the youth to come to, maybe even an outdoor school. So we're meddling in that idea, but the nice thing is we need a pond there anyways for retention. So it'll work out pretty well. As far as this one here, I don't foresee this happening anytime soon, but that is a plan for the future. And if you're familiar with this spot, we had our corn maze actually right here last year. So hopefully you got to come out and get lost. And then obviously this large chunk of land that runs along the interstate, I've got a million ideas for this area, but essentially right now it's going to be our future corn maze for this year, pumpkin patch, those things. But not in love with the location of this pond, but that was kind of a general idea. We need a pond in that area as well. And I'm putting the ponds in there because I think our biggest issue the fair runs into is stormwater. If you've been to the fair, there's not a single stormwater drain in the whole property. It's all ditches, and we don't have anything but ditches. So it's really important for us to kind of move towards the future. And this is the big project that I'm gonna show you next. This is next. This is the first thing we're gonna work on. This big pond and this parking lot. We need to repave this parking lot. I see you're with the police department. You've probably ran all over that parking lot doing all kinds of drills and whatnot. That parking lot needs a lot of help. And we kind of ran into it's a tripping hazard at this point. It's not in any way, shape, or form in good shape. So we're working on figuring out what that future looks like. And here is what my future for the fair looks like in terms of this parking lot. So the idea is to keep it wide open. So not only can we have rides, but we can have big iron. The police can still do all of their EVOC training. The fire departments can still do their trainings. All the stuff that the city, Fargo, and Cass County departments, they all come and train here. I'm not sure if you guys were aware of that or not, but they use this particular lot. And so the idea is to keep it that way so everybody can still use it. And the idea is to get some green space. I'm trying to be very competitive I want to be the largest fair in the state, if not region. And so this is a goal of mine. This area right here is something that is going to cost the fair roughly $7-8 million. We're going to concrete it. We're going to work towards the goal of actual storm drains. So the storm drain will go straight down the middle and then have inlets going outward. And then the pond that I just showed you on 11 will have to pipe underneath the road and go this direction. So that retention pond for that large area. This is a 9-acre parking lot. It's large. But we are in need of upgrading. And that's just the first step to the fairgrounds, but this is a goal. We're going to try to secure funding for this. Another ADA thing we're running into is everything here has got cracks and whatnot, and we keep paving over it. I found out in some spots there's 18 inches of asphalt on our parking lot. So as you can imagine, we just kept paving over it. Now at this point, if you're familiar with our grounds, if you walk into my office, you're actually going from the asphalt to our ramp. And it's over top. So it just kept getting paved over and over again. So all that has to be tore out, redone, put the piping in, done right, the correct way. And that's something that we're going to kind of work towards. I'm telling you all this because I thought it was relevant for you to kind of know there is a plan in place. The goal of the fair is to keep growing. The goal is to have more events. If you're familiar with the fair, you know in the past it's always been fair, big iron, and I won't even talk about that PGI event we all dislike in the city. That I can assure you, as long as I'm here, we will not have them again, and I made that promise, and I mean it, for the sanity of the city and myself and my cell phone and you folks that are getting those phone calls. But we are having the corn maze, the pumpkin patch. If I should say it here or not, but we just purchased the Lindenwood lights. So that will now be at the fairgrounds, and we're looking to grow that to be about 10 times the size of that one. We have the snow cross. Those are all events that we're running. The Renaissance Fair now. That's another event that we are running. So we're looking to grow that. We're doing more concerts in our arena. We updated that. And so we're just kind of going and growing. Our staff has grown. We're up to 18 staff members. When I got there, we were about 6. So we're really pushing forward to grow and have something to be proud of for this area. So I kind of want to make sure that you folks know that, and you can ask me a million questions. I can stand up here all day and talk, and I won't do that because I can see your agenda's full. But to just kind of round off, this is the goal right now of what we're asking that you allow the city staff to go forward with us and help us get the lingo correct and the verbiage that's proper and do things the right way with zoning. And that's my ask.
Thank you, Mr. Cashman. Commissioners, questions?
I'll just have to say, coincidentally, I just drove through the campground just the other day before I even saw this on the agenda item. I enjoy camping and, went and looked through there and, yeah, I mean, it's full, like you said, and there is a huge need for more camping, I think, in this end of town. And I love to see that you're going to expand this. I think there is some concerns, especially with the section on the east that's close to the neighborhood. So I think we, there's a couple of us that maybe think maybe a public meeting of some sort or something, public engagement, just so the neighbors are aware before we were to move forward on something like that.
If I may.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Well, I was just going to say,
Like to respond?
I definitely know that there will be, that we need to have that meeting, I believe is what I was told, that we would definitely have to have that no matter what. But also, I think it's important that the city kind of guide us, tell us how much space we have to be apart, how big the tree line needs to be, because obviously we need to put up more trees. And I already talked to Cass County Soil, they're going to help me with that. But I think we ran into some issues in the past with that ditch and how many trees we can actually put in or how close. So we need to make sure we get that depth correct. But yes, I think we definitely need to make sure there's a barrier or even a large, I don't know what you call that, but hill and some trees.
Anyone else? Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you. I guess I just have a concern as well as in reference to the ordinance, because I'm not sure now how that ordinance reads in reference to, I don't even know that you're supposed to have them all there, more or less year-round, other than, I was somewhere put under the impression they were for events only, but we've never really followed that. Maybe our city engineer or somebody can speak about that?
Mr. Shockley's reaching for his microphone.
Yeah, a great question, Commissioner Simmons. So this use, we will look back. This was a use that was in existence before it was part of the ET area. And so it is what's referred to as an existing non-conforming use, which means that they can continue to operate the campgrounds as it is. There was no restrictions on when it could be used or not. What they're requesting is that there's a couple ways that we could approach it. We could do an ordinance that would require a conditional use permit, or you could just make campgrounds as we could create some sort of zone for fairgrounds, which I would actually prefer if we just had like a separate ordinance just to cover the whole fairgrounds to deal with animal issues and all sorts. But there's different ways that we can attack that. But to answer your question, it's an existing non-conforming.
Non-conforming, okay. I guess my main inclination would be to agree with Commissioner George that before we approve or do anything, we have some community input from those residents, because they're the ones that are gonna have to listen to it. And I understand definitely more camping probably wouldn't hurt us in this community, and it's you keep it up. I just believe we should have those meetings prior to us deciding anything.
Oh, I want to ask, I'm not asking you guys to decide. I think we're asking to have the staff put something together that would, and then bring it. That way they know what they're asking, I guess, is my understanding right? Or
That's correct. Given that this was truly a policy question, the staff didn't want to start on anything till, if the commission's absolutely against it, we weren't going to start on it. So if it's something that you say, go ahead and look into it, bring it back, we can start on it.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Commissioner Olson?
My question would be would we want to have the public input before we even staff work on it?
I would say yes.
I wouldn't want to have the staff spend time on it and then we find out from the public that it would be a no-go and then we've already taken up time.
I would think,
That's I just want to know which way,
I would think Mr. Cash could put up a couple meetings out there with those neighbors and invite the public or whatever and do that rather than, I guess, I'm sure, I don't know, Tina, if that's something you'd want to organize. I think they should probably organize and take the lead on that. I know you want us to help you guide, but I think it's your project and it's your money and it's your everything.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, for me, and I failed to give you the history, and I apologize. The campgrounds was not originally put in by the fair. I think that's a huge, I think everybody just assumes it was for fair. That's the Cass County campsite. In fact, the current picture that you see right there, there's 22 acres, are the Cass County campsite. That was put in by Cass County Parks. This isn't a thing anymore. It was handed to the River Valley Fair Association. They gave it to they gave them the property. Then the fair fixed it up or ran it for years, and then we gave it back to the county to fix it up and do what have you. And then they gave it back, and it's been ours ever since, and it's been ran essentially for years as a man camp. In fact, they had tents and all kinds of weird things going on, and I think they had a lot of issues. Here recently, if you've driven by, like you said, you notice that that's not the case anymore. These are massive units, and actually what we would put in would be 50 amp service and larger infrastructure, because these units are bringing in our $1 million campers, 500,000, they're big. These people that are coming in town have money. And we do charge $700 a month. I think that's relevant so you understand. We do that to keep out certain issues that, I mean, ever since we've upped the prices, we haven't had very many calls at all on issues. So just figured I'd give you some history on.
And I agree, but I do agree with Commissioner Olson. I think we should have them. The other thing that comes to mind is that obviously there's no property tax for the city of West Fargo on this, so, and you're gonna have to have water. I'm assuming that would come from us, which do we have the capacity? And we're okay with that? Do we have that capacity to do to provide those services? And then somehow we're gonna have to get, obviously, generate some revenue out of this. So there's a lot of questions I think that have to be answered here.
And I will just kind of touch on that. I mean, and the city can as well. Obviously, I had more do all this work, and they assured me on their end of things, there's no doubt that the city can handle the load of the sewer and the water. The question is who's paying for it, and the question would be us. And I do believe, and I don't know, go ahead, man, sorry. You're ready to go.
Mr. Scott.
Pardon the interruption, Mr. Cashman. Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. Real quick on the infrastructure, Mr. Cashman has mentioned that Moore Engineering has been working on an infrastructure study for them. We are aware of that. We have yet to really see the results. It's going to come down to, I think from an engineering standpoint, there's always a solution for things. But we have infrastructure in the ground that was paid for by the city of West Fargo, regardless of whether or not there is truly capacity in there. There will be other questions to answer, such as what would a hookup fee be? Historically, this area has been allowed to utilize our water and sewer, but when we start talking significant development beyond what was done before, we'll have to take those things into consideration. But yes, first and foremost is a capacity question. I have no doubt that, tens of campers added probably won't overload our system, but at what point is that system overloaded? And what other service areas are out there? Potential service areas are out there. So, and similar to, needing a conditional use permit moving forward, we would want to address those things as we start to work with Mr. Cashman and his team, if directed to do so by the city commission. So,
I have a question, Mr. Scott or Mr. Larson possibly. With regard to sewer, is all the water usage that is used by the fairgrounds is has a meter pit of its own, and we're able to track how much water they're using, and that's how they're billed accordingly? How about sewer? How do we do that? Or Mrs. Fisk, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to comment, as Mr. Scott said, the infrastructure that leads to there is paid for by the city of West Fargo right now. It goes through the water goes through the meter pit, and the sewer is billed according to the water usage, but they are paying the same rate for water and sewer as every citizen within the city of West Fargo.
So that being said, as we continue this discussion and dialogue, would you have a recommendation that might change, and if so, what that might be?
I don't have a recommendation on what the change would be. I think it's very important to take into account the fact that the city of West Fargo citizens are financing and funding the transmission lines through assessments and taxes and so on and so forth, and we need to be diligent. It's good to help other areas out, and the fairgrounds is a fantastic place. But at the end of the day, someday we might not have capacity to serve something that we want. And plus, we have, at this point, do not have a rate that accounts for the fact that everybody else has put the infrastructure in that's needed to get the services there.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Mr. Scott?
And just to build on that, the current example is a sewer rehabilitation project on this 36-inch line that extends from Main Avenue here to the north of our lagoons, and that is roughly, I'm just going to throw out $5 million plus or minus. So it's the original install, it's the upkeep, it's the replacement. We would probably want to think through if there is a way to charge a hookup fee, as if this does move forward, what would an appropriate fee be if we can even get to that? Like I said, the engineering side of it is usually the easy part. It's just a matter of at what point does it stretch the political boundary and or financial boundary, so.
Okay, so the question before us this evening is whether or not we're going to ask the staff to continue to have these dialogues and guidance, because there's permits that have to be also acquired from other entities with regard to the drainage ditch that over and above the what it requires West Fargo to do. So, are there any other questions of Mr. Cashman while we have him here?
I guess, Tina, I'm not sure if I heard you right, so I want to make sure I heard. So if this were to pursue and they were to get these spots, would part of the talking would be to charge each individual spot a hookup, just as we do our citizens and water and sewer? Or are our citizens going to be paying for some of this?
What I was getting at was that the systems that get to this point, because this is outside city limits, have been paid for by our taxpayers. We don't individually charge the fairgrounds for the number of campers they have there. They get charged by the number of gallons that go through their main pump.
Okay,
So
okay.
they don't, it's not like the trailer court across over here
Right.
where each
They're
one
not
has-
individual, in other words.
Right,
So
correct.
somehow
Yep. Yep, because it's a big area.
I'll be honest, the only way I would agree to this or anything like this is that you pay your fair share of the bills. I'm not going to put it on our taxpayers anymore. And so if there's a way to do that, we can do it. You know, I'm okay with it, but I don't want to also give permission for our staff to go hours and hours into this. I think the first thing they should do is have that public meeting with those neighbors and see how that goes, see how they feel about it before we go in, spend too much money.
Would that be a joint meeting between, I mean, we would have representation there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
We would have to. There's
We'd
a
have
lot
to,
of
yep.
information that we're the gatekeepers on that we'd have to share with the public.
And I think a big part of this is to also think about future-wise, having that hookup fee, knowing what that is on our end. So we want to do something else, a new building, what have you. In the past, I'll be completely honest, and we've talked about this, the fairgrounds just did their own thing without doing the right thing in terms of permits or asking. We're going to do that now.
Make no mistake, Mr. Cashman, you know, the idea that you went through the expense of a comprehensive plan, if you will, for some of the land usage at the fairgrounds is greatly appreciated and something that has been a part of dialogue for generations of city commissions. And certainly this commission has been part of our dialogue. So that is greatly appreciated. Your interaction, your coming forward and kind of having us a part of that process is the way it ought to be. And, you know, for good neighbors, you know, we want to be a good neighbor, you want to be a good neighbor. So I think that's very positive. But still, that there's the question is to, you know, the cart in front of the horse or whatever, as to how we move forward with this from our public information meeting or whatever. And I would highly recommend, suggest if I could, that you meet again with staff And I would think that you'd want to meet with, our administrative team and kind of lay out a game plan. And, Mr. Nelson, Aaron Nelson, our planning and zoning person, should also be included in that as to what type of things that we want to bring forward, because we are within 300 feet of the residential neighborhood. And that, in my opinion, demands that we have a public information meeting for those citizens to have some input or just to be made aware of what the scope of the project is.
Do we
So,
need a motion, Mayor, for something though?
yeah,
Okay.
that'd be fine, but the motion would be that we direct administrative staff to meet with Mr. Cashman regarding the campground facilities
Well, that's,
and report back, what would be a fair time, Mrs. Fisk?
Mayor, all due respect, that's your motion, but I'm going to make the motion. My motion will be to allow our staff to have probably 2 public input meetings with the community. I don't want to see our staff get into this detailed, let's see how that goes first, and then you can come back to us. So that'd be my motion.
We have a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to continue the campground facilities discussion at the Red River Valley Fair based on at least 2 public information
Thank you, yes.
meetings. Is it, Mrs. Fisk?
Can I clarify one question? These meetings will be set up and coordinated through Cody at, Mr. Cashman at the fairgrounds, not through us?
I think, Mr.
Okay. Okay,
They're his
just
neighbors,
wanted to
but
be
we will
clear.
make sure that we
So-
attend. We will
yes.
have some staff and myself and probably whoever to attend them. But I
Okay,
think you
thank
can
you.
do that, Cody. Talk to your neighbors
Yeah, it's,
as quick as we can.
we have the facility, we can have. a
It'll be
meeting.
better coming from you than us, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
I'll get direction on how to do that, so.
Is there any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cashman. Item number 4 is a public hearing and second reading and the final plat approval of a proposed grant addition rezoning from agriculture to R2, limited multiple dwellings at 7802 52nd Avenue West. Mr. Aaron Nelson will be presenting, the Director of Planning and Zoning for the City of West Fargo. It is in pages 69 through 102 in your packet. Good evening, Mr. Nelson. Welcome.
All right, thank you, and good afternoon. So item 4, titled Grant Addition. This is a request for final plat approval and public hearing and second reading of a proposed zone change. This item was presented to you for the first reading of the rezone at your May 2nd, 2022 meeting. There have been no material changes to the requested application that was presented a couple meetings ago. However, I would like to provide a quick recap and some updated information from the applicant for you all tonight. So in terms of the recap, just scroll through the packet here. The overall purpose of this application is to establish development entitlements for a future medium-density residential development. The proposed zoning change would rezone the property from A, agricultural, to R2, limited multiple dwelling residential. And then the proposed subdivision plat would plat the property into a single 6.6 acre lot for future development. With access and city services provided via Rachel Drive on the south portion of the plat and via a city-owned access lot, which is located on the east side of the plat. The proposed plat includes a subdivision agreement, which is included in your packet, and which outlines the requirements for construction, maintenance, repair, and public use of the private drives, of the future private drives that are proposed within the development. This request comes to you with a recommendation for approval from the Planning and Zoning Commission. And then at your meeting of May 22nd, 2022, your commission approved the first reading of the rezone with the condition that the developer come back to the City Commission for final approval of the layout of the interior driveways. And so since then, the applicant has expressed concern with this condition since their sale of the property is contingent upon securing the proposed development entitlements prior to completion of the sale to the professional developer. To address the Commission's desire for some additional information regarding the layout of the future private drives, the developer did submit a few conceptual driveway plans, which are also included in your packet here, and I can kind of scroll through these pretty quick, but The applicant and the professional developer, I think, are both here tonight. Should you have any specific questions for them? And I believe they would like to say a few words as well. But in essence, the layout is pretty straightforward. Connections to the public street on the south, the access lot on the east, and then the professional developer also owns this lot just to the northeast, and their intention would be to connect the driveway system to the existing townhome development to the northeast there. There are a few different kind of preliminary layouts. None of this is, final by any means, but just intended to show their development intent. So the applicant is requesting the City Commission approve the proposed zone change and subdivision plat without any conditions or any extra requirements of City Commission approval. And lastly, I know there were some different concerns such as safety that were brought up the last time this was before you, and so I think it is important to note that any and all future development, regardless of any conditions of approval or not, any development does need to be reviewed by city staff for compliance with zoning codes, fire codes, building codes, any existing codes that are applicable to development, and those reviews are done at the time of building permitting. So again, the request before you today is to hold the public hearing and then to consider final approval of the subdivision plat, as well as the second reading of the requested rezone. So that's kind of the quick overview. Happy to answer any additional questions or to dive deeper into any of the details here.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Questions, Mr. Nelson? Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you, Aaron. I'm looking at this second reading final plot, correct?
Correct.
But I don't see my addendum on here that we put on. Did you take that off?
For the condition of approval?
Well, this was the one where we had it on here where they come back for with the final plot drawing. Commissioner George, remember that? We wanted to see the streets, we wanted to see everything.
Yep.
If I'm reading this right, it's not on here if we vote.
Correct. And so it's my understanding, and the applicant can speak to this, but their request is to either approve or deny the request without the
But
condition.
we already approved it once with my attachment, right? So isn't that still up? I mean, it's still on here. You can't just say, take it off.
So their request for you is, if that's the case, they're not looking for conditional approval, and so that's the way that it's structured in the amendment, or excuse me, in the staff report. So that's the applicant's request, and we're just presenting it as such.
Excuse me. Mr. Shockley, do you have something?
Yeah, you have to have a public hearing and a second reading before it becomes effective, so the applicant is requesting a different, not having that condition as part of the final approval.
Additional questions of Mr. Nelson?
I have a question. Excuse me, I have a question, President Dartis.
Mrs. Fisk.
Aaron, would they not, when they decide how they're going to lay out the inside, would they not have to come back and get approval through commission on how they plan on doing the inner workings of the area itself?
So that's the request that the applicant is making. Their request is to approve the subdivision and the rezone without any conditions. If that were to be approved by you all, then they would have to come back for their building permits and to establish a public a public access easement, which is outlined within the subdivision agreement within the packet there. But in terms of the way that the motion was made at the last meeting, their request is to not move forward with, or not move forward if that's going to be the action.
So in other words, they don't want to show us the drawings until they're done. Is that accurate?
Correct, and I can let the applicant speak to that in more detail.
Okay, thank you.
Please, Mr. Shockley.
And just one point of clarification, the agreement that the applicants and the developer are willing to sign for the placement of the access easement, because this would be one large lot for the infrastructure inside, there are certain criteria that are set forth in the development agreement that they'd have to meet, that they'd have to present it to staff. It has certain requirements regarding turnarounds. We'd have to review it. It has certain maintenance requirements. So the actual road itself, which I think is a different issue than the layout of the development, but the road itself, we've addressed pretty well in the agreement. I think it's on page 82 and 83 of your packet, and just talking about the public access easement. So,
I understand that, John, but just a red flag goes up when they don't want to show us, that's all. To me, that's a red flag.
Again, questions for Mr. Nelson? All right. We are gaveling out of the regular agenda. We are now in the public hearing. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Mr. President and Commissioners. Joel Fremstead, I'm here on behalf of Kathleen Grant. As I mentioned last time, Ms. Grant is battling through some health issues with chemo and radiation, so when I'm by her, and for her benefit, I'm wearing a mask, so just a little background. Commissioner, I don't do all this all the time, but what we're here to ask for is a rezoning. And in my experience, when we're talking about rezoning, that's one thing about, you know, the amount of, you know, houses and the amount of people you want in an area. That's separate from then where the roads and all these things are eventually gonna go. So respectfully, I don't think anyone's trying to hide the ball. It's that when you're trying to develop a project like that, to some degree, you have to figure out where things can go. And so I wish the developer would be fine, because Ms. Grant is gonna be priced out. Her taxes are $40-some thousand a year. She can't stay there. You know, she's trying to survive her own fights, not fight with all of you. At the same time, I think I can appreciate that when we're here for a zoning, and then we met with most every department within the city, and with Mr. Shockley and all the others, the development agreement is here to protect the interest of the citizens. So if you look at the developer agreement, they still must come back and get approval from the city of West Fargo, and this is on page 81, for any proposed other or further plating and zoning, or for any building permits and any other permit. And then if you go on to 82, there's gotta be, prior to recording, an approved access easement. And of course, we've already dealt with issues from the park, and it's like an $85,000 fee in lieu there. So respectfully, they just don't want to try to, political bodies, you know, your role is important, but it's very hard to go spend $1 million on figuring out an infrastructure plan and then come to you, and then someone might decide, well, I think it'd be neat if it did this turn or that turn. And I don't think anyone would be that petty. I know you guys take your responsibilities seriously, but I just ask that you not look at this from the perspective of us trying to hide the ball. It's that there's only one possible buyer for this property because of the way my client's been hemmed in. I think I actually believe Mr. Bullis when he feels bad when he says that he hemmed us in, right? Mr. Bullis is a lawyer like me, so he'll take his feelings, they'll be fine. But we are gonna protect everyone from our end. This is a family property that Mrs. Grant is sad to see go. She just can't keep it. And if we don't get this passed without the extra condition, and I want to make it also clear, Commissioner, that there is conditions. There's just not your additional one, not because we don't think it's important, but because we already think it's addressed. So the conditions are that we continue to work with staff, that we have that subdivision agreement, that we have the deed in lieu, and that the final plat has the easement. So there's lots of conditions. It's just that the builder has told us, or the possible buyer has told us, that won't work because it's gonna mess up us trying to get our entitlements. So I ask that you do allow this to go as we originally brought it forward, and that you trust in the staff and the city attorney and the people that are dealing with fire and police and all the other protections, that they're not gonna let anything happen behind your back. So with that, I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Fremstead. Any questions, additional questions for Mr. Fremstead? Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this issue?
Yeah, Commission President, Commissioners, John Eunice with Eagle Ridge Development. I think both Aaron and Joel did a great job explaining our position. This isn't that we're trying to hide anything. It's simply that, you know, we're looking for the rules of what is the zoning for this property before we start the design process. We've gone through and laid out a few different options of how this could look, but until we have a piece of property that has an actual zoning, it's a lot of risk both on the acquisition side and on the design side to move forward and come with something that we know 100% not only would get past you, but we also got to work with planning staff and engineering staff in making sure that it meets the infrastructure requirements. So it's kind of like a cart and a horse thing. Again, we're certainly not trying to hide anything. We simply we don't know specifically how this property is going to lay out. We do know that we give 3 connection options, which is better than anyone else's alternative, because we do own the land to the north and we've got the 2 city connections. So with that, I'd open it up for any questions you guys might have.
Question, Mr. Jonas. Commissioner George.
I just have a quick comment. I mean, last time we asked to see a plan, you brought us a couple. You know, I know that we don't know what it'll be or exactly, but I do appreciate you did that. I prefer the second one. I think that's pretty nice. But, no, I just appreciate you did that. I know my concern was the integrity of the trees, and, you know, it looks like you are preserving at least, you know, a border, shelter belt type of thing. You know, the neighbors to the north, it looks like they will still have that barrier in there, so I appreciate that. I also understand a lot of those trees are dead and need to be cut down anyway, so.
Yeah, I mean, we did, when we looked at this property to buy it, obviously, I think those trees add some value, but, you know, some of them aren't gonna survive, whether there is or isn't any construction there, but we'll do our best.
Sure, yeah. So, no, I thank you for the work you've done on this.
Thank you. Commissioner Simmons?
I just want to say, you know, my opinion is not against the families, and it's not against you folks. I know, you know, we hear a lot about patching things together, and this is one of those instances where it's kind of, it's going to have to go that way. But I do recall, to credit to you folks, a few years back, you did want to buy this property, and at that time it wasn't for sale. So that's why we're here today, really. And now we got to make it right. And all I want to do is make sure that those roads, the access in and out of there, are safety, and people can get in and out with complaining to us 2 years from now again.
I agree, and we certainly are gonna do our part, and that's where we think the development agreement does a good job of explaining how we need to go through this process, and we're gonna make sure that the roads are designed so that they're safe for emergency services and for trash removal and snow removal.
Additional questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this particular issue? Again, we are talking about the public hearing for approval of the grant additions rezoning from agricultural to R2, limited multiple dwellings at 7802 52nd Avenue West. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this? Seeing none, the public hearing is closed. We are now back in the regular agenda. Commissioners?
I think that I made my point, that we want these developers to be cognizant and realize where we're coming from. When they don't do the right thing, they listen. I think everybody's hearing us, so I'm willing to support this project tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner
So
Simmons.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Simmons moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading and final plat approval of the proposed grant addition rezoning from agricultural to R2, limited multiple dwellings at 7802 52nd Avenue West. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you all that participated this evening. Item number 5 is a conditional use permit to allow for illuminated signs facing residential districts as per section 4-460.7.14 of the general sign provisions within the Westview 4th edition. Ms. Sankey is presenting City of Planner.
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis and Commissioners. This application was received in order to allow for illuminated signs facing residential districts for commercial office park development. Under section 4-460.7.14 of the general sign provisions, signs in residential districts and signs facing residential districts shall not be illuminated unless approved by a conditional use permit. A similar application was approved for a monument sign for the townhouses of Charleswood development on 19th Avenue East facing the Huntington Woods development to the north. Signage was designated so LED lighting was directed down toward the letters and not to cause adverse effects such as glare or traffic safety problems. Other signs conditionally permitted previously included electronic message centers for Lutheran Church of the Cross, Meadowbrook Bible Chapel, Triumph West, as well as the Hulbert Arena, with the conditions that included limiting the hours of operation of the electronic message center from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Less than half a mile east, there is a strip mall in the city of Fargo with no conditions related to lighting signage facing residential areas to the south. There is also an electronic message center with off-premise signage for Cheyenne High School, which was permitted as a conditional use in 2013. Under the criteria for granting a conditional use permit, illuminated signage is regulated by the sign code as summarized in the staff report in the discussion section. As with examples mentioned, conditions for new signage could include hours of operation, time of day illumination to ensure intensity of lighting is reduced during dark, foot candles do not exceed a certain standard, sign industry standards for signage, etc. Notices to property owners were sent within property owners within 350 feet, not counting streets. Those emails are included in your packet. At the public hearing on May 10th, a couple of individuals on the south side of 40th Avenue spoke against the application. Representatives of the subject property spoke in favor of the request and indicated a willingness to restrict the hours of lighting. Emails have since been submitted by members of the Westview Association asking for consideration and support of illuminated signage during early evening with compromises in terms of limiting the times the signs are illuminated. In terms of consistency of the comprehensive plan and other applicable ordinances, the signs are accessory to the surrounding buildings and appear to be appropriately signed for the area. At the May 10th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, the Commission denied the request. The applicants are requesting for consideration of the illuminated signage. If it is found through deliberation by the Commission that the proposal will not generate a nuisance to adjacent property owners and the general public, it is recommended that the city approve the proposed application on the basis that it is consistent with city plans and ordinances, with recommended conditions of approval as follows. Consideration be given to any public comments that may be received. Signage follow the commercial office park standards, and a signed conditional use permit agreement which outlines these details or any additional conditions by the City Commission is received. This is not a public hearing, but there are representatives from the Westview Association that may want to speak, and I'm available to answer any questions as well.
Thank you, Ms. Sankey. Questions for the lady? Please, Commissioner George.
So they're not questions so much as comments. So I read through all the letters, and there's compelling arguments, of course, on both sides. I think ultimately, West Fargo residents and businesses needs to be our primary consideration. But ultimately, okay, a lot of businesses brought up a timer or time limit on the signage as to being a fair compromise. And I guess that's the direction I would like to see on this, is they had proposed 10 p.m., and I think that's too late. Most of these businesses close at like 5 or 6. I looked it up, and I don't think there's any reason the signs need to be lit until 10 o'clock at night. So
those conditions could be added to the conditional use permit. Again, there are individuals available. I believe that the issue is in the wintertime, where they would like lighted signs so people could locate them. I can defer to them if they would like to speak as well.
I'm sorry.
Please, Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Commissioner George on that. I think they're all willing to compromise. But I'm looking at the other ones in that area, and they're all 6 to 10, the church. And so I think if we do something, we should try to be maybe consistent with the other ones as well. So my recommendation would be,
When you say the other ones, the ones facing 40th?
I'm referring to the Lutheran Church of the Cross, Meadow Ridge Bible, and Triumph Western.
Throughout the entire town.
Right,
Have them
yeah, that we
10
keep
p.m.
them consistent as far as the times. And if they're, from what I read, I'd like to hear from them citizens, but from the letters I read, they were all willing to compromise somewhat. And I'm concerned about our citizens across the road. I haven't heard from them, so I don't know if they're here at all, but.
Okay. On a conditional use permit, normally, there isn't public input. But we're going to make an exception tonight because I've heard two of my fellow commissioners, and I agree with that. And I hope that Commissioner Olson does too. So we're going to ask if there's anybody from the public and I want to limit on 2 avenues. If you live south of 40th and you live in the city of Fargo, you can give your name and your displeasure with this, but you're not going to testify on a lighting ordinance in the city of West Fargo, okay? If you're on 4th Street, you absolutely, I'd invite you to the microphone, state your name and your address and your concerns. Or if you're here for the
Opposite.
the other side of this, I'd welcome you to come through. We're going to limit everybody to 3 minutes, please. So we got one gentleman stepping up. Here we go. Thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. So I am Nathan Anderson. I'm a partner at Prairie Wood Wealth Management who has one of the office condos facing 40th Avenue. I mean, ultimately for us, the question about timing of signage, we were told, some of the other locations, the timer was set to 10 p.m. So that was kind of our thought process on 10 p.m. I agree that we don't usually see clients at 10 p.m., but we do occasionally see clients in the early evening. I believe we have a representative from Landon's Light that occasionally does, foundation events in the evening. So what's important to us is primarily that time frame, especially in November through February, March, especially for us as a wealth management firm that does taxes. It's a busy season. Sometimes we are there late. Being able to be found by clients, being able to be seen by the rush hour traffic that goes by both on 40th Avenue and 4th Street. We're primarily concerned about that time frame when there is a lot of traffic, when there are already headlights, is already street lights in the area. We're not looking to add additional lighted signage around the time periods when people are trying to go to bed or things are otherwise quiet. I think the other thing I know, I'd heard some comments about just neighbors, if they're using their backyards and having the lighted signage in the way, primarily for us, like I said, it's November through February, March when we care about it, when it gets dark early. Very few people are using their backyards at that time of the year. And so, summer, it's already light till 10 o'clock. I think in most cases, hopefully that would be a reasonable compromise where it doesn't impact people too significantly, but still allows, our clients to find us, allows us to, the community to be aware that we're there and available and open for business. So, any questions?
Mr. Anderson, thank you. Is there questions, Commissioners? Thank you, sir. The gentleman, Mr. Anderson, spoke in favor of this. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor? All right. Is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition? Okay. Commissioner Simmons.
So, I'm assuming all you folks are in favor then if you're sitting here, you just don't want to get up. So, would the 10 to 6 be a good compromise? 10 p.m. at night to 6 a.m. in the morning? Would you be okay with that, Commissioner George?
6 a.m. to 10
I mean,
p.m.
No signage lit.
Oh,
Yeah, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., no signage lit.
I mean, if that's what everybody else is doing, if it's consistent, then I guess that would be okay with that, yeah.
Okay, I would,
otherwise we'd have to go back and change all of those if we wanted everybody to be similar.
I just think it's fair if they're willing to do it. So if that's the motion I can make, Mayor, to move this forward,
Please.
change the time from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The lights cannot be on, and other than that, enjoy your business and make some money, right? That's why you're there. And make the city money, I should say.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson, second. Been moved and seconded to approve a conditional use permit to allow for illuminated signs facing the residential districts as per sections 4-460.7.14 of the general sign provisions within the Westview 4th edition, that the signage must not be illuminated from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 6, Eagle Run Plaza 13th Edition. Final plat approval and conditional use permit to allow for multiple dwellings in a C light commercial zoning district at 3255 6th Street West and 661 32nd Avenue West. Ms. Sankey, again, City Planner, City of West Fargo.
Thank you, President Dardis and Commissioners. This application was received in order to combine two existing platted lots into one for sale and development and a conditional use permit for construction of a mixed-use development containing residential units in a light commercial district. The applicant intends to construct a 5-story mixed-use building with commercial space along the east side of the building, tuck under garages on the main floor, and 52 apartments on the upper levels. According to the zoning ordinance, multiple dwellings are allowed as a conditional use in the light commercial district, subject to yard requirements. Under the corridor overlay district regulations, there is a higher construction standard which would require the applicant to submit site and elevation and building plans to the Planning and Zoning and City Commissions at a later date for approval prior to issuance of a building permit. Excuse me. Due to the nature of the conditional use permit, the City Commission has authority to impose such conditions it deems necessary to fulfill the purpose and intent of the conditional use permit ordinance and to place it in greater alignment with the goals outlined by the comprehensive plan. At their February 8th, 2022 meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the proposed retracement plat and the conditional use permit subject to 9 conditions listed in the staff report. It is recommended that the city approve the retracement plat and conditional use permit on the basis it is consistent with city plans and ordinances, with recommended conditions as follows. Updated drainage plan is received and approved by the city engineer if necessary. Updated utility plan is received and approved by the city engineer if necessary. A signed final plat is received with any necessary easements. An attorney title opinion is received. Certificate is received showing taxes are current. A signed conditional use permit is received. A pedestrian circulation plan be submitted. Development plan will be required to meet but will not be limited to the corridor overlay district, supplementary district regulations, landscaping standards, off-street parking and loading requirements, and sign regulations. And the residential use is permitted only in conjunction with the ground floor commercial. You will be seeing the site plan at the next City Commission meeting. If this goes through, it will go through the Planning and Zoning Commission at their next meeting for site plan review. I'm available for any questions, as is the developer.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions, Ms. Sankey?
Not really a question.
Please, Commissioner Olson.
But we had a similar request on a different parcel in the same neighborhood for multi-purpose, multi-use, and but they were asking for tax incentives and different things like that. So is there any such request here for any kind of a TIF for a pilot or anything like that that would go along with this?
No.
Okay. Another one would be, looks like there's lots of parking available there in their initial drawings. But we've got a city street, which would be 33rd Avenue. And I guess my concern is that what we've experienced up on Cheyenne Street, where a lot of the tenants are parking on the streets versus in their designated parking spots and taking up business spots. I'm just concerned that we'll have lots of tenants parking on city streets there, as you know. But it happens everywhere. But it's just a concern that there's enough parking.
It appears from reviewing the site plan that they more than meet the parking requirements for both the commercial and the residential use as per the city ordinance.
Quick question, is that street a city street or a privately owned street?
33rd is a city street and 6th Street West is a city street, and then to the north and to the west, those are private access easements.
Okay. Thank you. Additional questions, Ms. Sankey?
I do, thank you.
Please, Commissioner Simmons.
How much commercial is this actually taking up? I mean, in this retrospect of this
On the east side of the building, I believe it's 6,600
It
square
looks like
feet.
just one side, right?
Correct, on the east side. So this area right here is designated as commercial.
So do we know like how many businesses it's gonna be set up for,
Has yet to be
determined?
Mr. Jonas?
Yeah, John Eunice again with Eagle Ridge Development. That's a great question. So it's currently designed to have 3 separate bays, all over 2,000 square feet. And one of the unique features of this is that we designed it as a 2-story retail option. So there's an ability to expand that square footage up above 10,000 square feet as well. In an ideal world, we'd have a single tenant that would come in and take the whole thing.
Right. So are you building it, sir, in like phases, you mean? Or-
This is all gonna, we're currently in for permit on the whole thing, with the exception of the commercial fit up. And we'll fit that up once we get a tenant lined up for that space.
So right now, the drawing looks like there's 2 stories. Are you saying that that would only be a 1-story?
So I don't know if I can control this or not. I'm gonna try, bear with me. Because the elevations do a great job of kind of showing what we're proposing. Along the far east side, see if I can get here, right here. So this is what you'd see if you were at the intersection of Cheyenne and 32nd Avenue and you're looking to the southwest. So we've got the ability to go 2 stories of commercial on this portion of the building. The rest of the main floor that you can't really see is enclosed parking for the residential units.
And so there's apartments behind it, right back there?
Yep, so this is the apartment
No, I
portion of
mean,
the building.
adjacent properties that are,
Yep, the adjacent property, there's some 3-story garden apartments just to the south of this
and
property.
then right on the north side would be that, commercial?
Yep, you got Mas Tequila and Randy's immediately to the
Okay,
north.
okay.
So we feel like this gives us, by going with mixed use, it kind of blends in what's going on with the lights on the south side as well, and we're still trying to preserve a nice commercial frontage from that visibility as you're on 32nd Avenue and heading towards it.
Additional questions for the gentleman? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I would make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second?
I didn't hear what you said, I'm sorry.
We move to approve.
Okay. I'm sorry, yes, I'll second that with the, obviously, we all want more and more, commercial, but it's getting hard to get.
Been moved and seconded to approve the Eagle Run Plaza 13th Edition Final Plat Approval and Conditional Use Permit to allow for multiple dwellings in a light commercial zoning district at 3255 6th Street West and 661 32nd Avenue West, as presented by Ms. Sankey. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on, to item 7 is the second reading and final plat approval, proposed North Pond at the Preserve 15th Edition, rezoning from commercial office park to light commercial at 350 23rd Avenue East, Lot 1, Block 1 of the North Pond at the Preserve 2nd Edition. Ms. Sankey.
Thank you. This application was received to replat and rezone for a medical office park development. You may recall last year, the city approved site plans under the Interstate Corridor Overlay District regulations for the Specialty Surgery Center, a 3-story medical complex with plans to go through additional site plan review for a similar building to the east, which would be connected. The applicant determined they would need to have separate lots for each structure. Under the Commercial Office Park District regulations, they wouldn't meet the setback requirements due to connection between the 2 proposed structure. So they applied to rezone the property to light commercial in order to meet setback requirements, as well as to replat to provide for 5 separate parcels with private access easements throughout the development. The Interstate Corridor Overlay District building and site plan requirements would remain in place on the property, meaning any development, any subsequent building permits shall be subject to site and building plan review and approval by the Planning and Zoning and City Commissions. At the October 4th, 2020, it is recommended that the city approve the proposed application on the basis it is consistent with city plans and ordinances with recommended conditions of approval as follows. Drainage is reviewed and approved by the engineering department during review and permitting processes for separate undeveloped lots. As per the interstate corridor overlay district regulations, any developments and subsequent building permits shall be subject to site and building plan review and approval by the Planning and Zoning and City Commissions. I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sankey. Questions? In your expertise, there's nothing unusual about this request?
No, with the previous zoning, they wouldn't be able to connect, which was their intent all along. It was, you know, this was all going to be one lot, but now they're proposing separate lots, so. And you'll have a chance to review each and every development that comes through.
Okay. Commissioners?
I'll make the motion to approve second reading and final plat.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the second reading and final plat approval for the proposed North Pond at the Preserve 15th Edition, rezoning from Commercial Office Park to Light Commercial at 350 23rd Avenue East, Lot 1, Block 1 of North Pond at the Preserve 2nd Edition. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Vote was 3-1. Item number 8, Poplar River First Edition, a replat and planned unit development amendment for a proposed office building at 105 13th Avenue East. Mr. Malachi Peterson, City Planner, City of West Fargo.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President and Commissioners. In the early 2000s, a PUD amendment for this property was approved by the West Fargo Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as the City Commission. This PUD amendment allowed for a deviation from multiple family residential on the site and for the north side of the property to develop with a dental office, with the understanding that the south side of the property would be developed as a professional office space. According to the 2005 PUD, a PUD amendment would be needed at the time that the south portion of the property was developed. Fast forward to now, the applicant is proposing to develop the south side of the property with a joint medical office and clinic space similar to the same footprint on the north side of the property. He is also proposing a replat to split the property into two halves for tax purposes. The proposed site would have shared access with the pre-existing development as well as a new access via 14th Avenue East. A detailed landscaping plan has been submitted showing an extension of the existing 24-inch tall landscaping berm along First Street. The landscaping plan also shows the addition of shrubs and trees to the new site. The site appears to meet all landscaping standards for the corridor overlay district. The 2005 PUD amendment called for parking lot lighting to the low-intensity lighting and directed away from residential areas, and the PUD amendment from 2005 also called for business signage to include wall and monument types of signs only and to follow the corridor overlay district regulations. City staff is recommending the proposed application on the basis that is consistent with the city plans and ordinances, with the recommended conditions of approval as follows. 1, that development of Lot 2, Block 1 will be subject but not limited to corridor overlay district standards, 4-440 supplementary district regulations, 4-449A landscaping standards, 4-450 off-street parking and loading requirements, and 4-460 sign regulations. In addition to following the 4-460 sign regulations, staff also recommends that any signage should be either wall or monument type signs as provided for in the 2005 PUD amendment. Any additional lighting proposed for the parking should also be low intensity lighting and directed away from residential areas. This recommendation also mirrors the language from the 2005 PUD amendment. 5, an attorney title opinion is received. 6, an updated drainage plan is received and approved by the city engineer. 7, a signed final plat is received with any necessary easements. And 8, a certificate is received showing taxes are current. At their May 10th, 2022 meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the replat and planned unit development amendment with the 8 conditions of approval as noted in the staff report. I'm here in case you have any questions, as well as the developer.
Commissioners, questions? Mr. Peterson? Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you. I have actually the same as probably the last one. Once again, he wants to change what he's doing. I was here in '05 for the PUD we did there. I'm concerned when he says medical facility, what he's referring to. Is a non-taxable, nonprofit, or is it a private? Do we know that question? Can we answer that or not?
So I'll allow the applicant and the developer to answer that question. I believe when we originally talked about it, it was still speculative tenant space with the idea or the goal of having it some sort of professional office building / clinic space. But I'm not sure if that's changed or not, but I'll allow Patrick to come up and talk a little bit about that.
Okay, thank you. Is that okay, Mayor?
Certainly. Good evening. Would you please state your name?
Patrick Cap. Thank you, Commissioners. The prospective tenant I am working with is tax-paying, not a non-taxable entity. If that
I'm
was
sorry, could you say that again?
the potential tenant I'm working with is not a non-taxed entity.
Okay, okay, so it's taxable entity, so,
Yes, it should be taxed as normal, so
This is just south of the dentist's facility, right?
that's,
Yeah.
and east of the nursing home.
Okay, very good. Any questions, additional questions for the gentleman?
just the comment that I made that, Patrick, because, I've been around since you built the building, and that, so when you mention taxes, the red flag goes up, but I totally understand your situation. You've held it onto that land for many, many years, so I definitely want to see you develop it as well. So,
I would add that part of it is just the financing is simpler when I will be splitting the lot. And then that portion will be free and clear. And, that's a big part of it too.
Sure.
And then liability is also split into 2 LLCs. So all that goes into it too. It's not just tax reasons. There's no hidden,
No, yep.
I'm not trying to hide anything there. So
Thank you, sir.
thank you.
Additional questions of Mr. Peterson?
Just-
Commissioner George,
Just
please.
a quick question. Are those condos or townhomes or whatever right next door?
Yes, I believe those are townhomes.
Are there any issues with those residents having offices, businesses, possibly a medical facility? Has anybody expressed any concern right next door there or any issues?
No, so as part of that original meeting with the Planning and Zoning Commission, we send out notices and we haven't heard anything back from anybody.
And the dentist's office has been there for many, many years, long before that, so, it's been vacant property, so people would know it was already designed for what he's using it for, so they should know.
Okay,
But
thank you.
Which is one of the reasons why, with the staff recommendations for lighting and signage, we sort of mirrored that on the 2005 language, just to try to head off, any problems or issues before somebody might bring that up, just because we've talked a lot tonight about
Yeah, I
lighting
was
and-
thinking
and
about
things like that.
sarcastically in my head. I'm like, oh, I hope nobody puts a big old lighted sign on the back of that building face,
And it's still in the PUD, correct?
Correct.
So they're still gonna have to talk to those people anyway, Commissioner George, so that's why I like PUDs.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Anything additional? Okay, what's your pleasure, Commissioners?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to replat and a planned unit development amendment for the proposed office building at 105 13th Avenue East, Poplar River First Edition, as presented by Mr. Peterson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. I-
Mayor,
Yes, please.
since there might be conversations on these last few items, can we take a 5-minute break?
We stand adjourned for 5 minutes.
I like that too this time around. I might take him up on that.
be able to stick it right there.
Okay.
I apologize, did you email it today?
Yeah, it was this afternoon, like 3:30 or something like
Budget
that.
meetings until here, so
Understandable, yeah,
that'll work just fine though, and then
okay.
should, oh yeah, it popped up.
Let me make sure. Okay. All right. And then to advance, I just use the mouse.
Yep, that, or if you want, we can pull this out and you can use
Okay.
the arrow keys
Okay, great.
back.
Okay, thank you.
Is it coming up? So you think you'd be missed, huh? Yeah, I should have just kept on going. Also, resolution directions and levy non-chapter.
Yep.
We'll reconvene the West Fargo City Commission meeting. At the present time, we are on item number 9, which is a presentation on the North Dakota DOT funding proposal by Ms. Cindy Gary, Executive Director of the Fargo-Moorhead MetroCog. Welcome this evening.
Good evening. Thank you for putting this item on your agenda tonight. And I will say in advance that Commissioners George and Olson have already heard this information, so I'm sorry that you have to listen to it again. But I was asked by the Policy Board to bring this around to our local jurisdictions on the North Dakota side of the river, just because this does have implications for the future of transportation funding. And I'm happy to report that we have, I think, worked in a positive direction on this since it went to the Policy Board meeting and since there was an article in the newspaper about it and so forth. So that's the good news, and I'll talk about that as I go through my presentation. I just wanted to provide a bit of background first. I think many of you have already heard this, but the metro area population was formerly exceeded formerly exceeded 200,000 in the 2020 census, and that by federal law pushes our MPO into a transportation management area. We're still an MPO, but we fall into a transportation management area designation, which means that when the Federal Register comes out with all the funding by state for surface transportation block grants and transportation alternative funding and any other kind of funding that's allocated geographically or by population, we actually end up with a line item in that register stating a certain amount of money that will be suballocated to us. That's the term that we're using. It formally still has to go through North Dakota DOT, but it has to be spent within our urbanized area. So that's to come within this next year. We're expecting to see that change made. So that's one of the changes. Another pot of funds that we will see as part of that is listed under this first main bullet here, and that's the carbon reduction program that's part of the new Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And so I'll show you how that breaks out from a dollar perspective based on the information we've been getting from the DOT. One of the other main changes that will occur with the TMA designation is that all of you as local leaders that are on the Policy Board, working collectively with your commissions, you will get to prioritize and select by working with each other which projects get funded. We have a really great track record of cooperation the last several years because of the diversion and everything, and I'm really hoping that carries us through many years to come so that we can work cooperatively on the best way to spend those funds for the future, for our whole metro area. This table shows how the DOT has calculated our expected funding to break out. These are based on formulas that are set forth in federal law. And so with the surface transportation block grant funds, 90% of our allocation of the obligation authority rate of 90% ranges from about 8.7 million up to 9.2 million over the next 4 years. Now, they have since told us that in going back to about 15 years worth of history, they have received about 98% of the funding. And about 98% of the funding has been received through the obligation authority. So we can expect this, I think, to be close to another million by the time it's all said and done with the surface transportation block grant funds. Now, this is for the North Dakota side of the river. Minnesota will receive a much smaller amount because the percentage of their population of as a part of our metro area is much smaller, but there will be some allocated for them as well. And then I'm going to skip over this next line for now. That's really at the crux of the issue here. And jump to the Transportation Alternatives Program. This is great news because when we've been going through the North Dakota solicitation process, our metro area as a whole has gotten anywhere from 0 to maybe 300 and some thousand in terms of projects that have been selected through their process. And now through the TMA process, we'll be getting, you know, over 700, close to $800,000 a year in TA funds. So we should be able to make great progress with our trails systems and other projects that qualify for that TA funding. And then that new funding that I mentioned, the carbon reduction funding, we should receive 1 to maybe 1.1 million on that, and that can be used for either planning studies or actual infrastructure that helps the environment, helps reduce carbon production. So one of the things we would like to do with that early on is an electric vehicle readiness study. Other things that have been mentioned are things like street light replacement with LED, and there's a number of other processes that we could do to help reduce emissions, reduce carbon. So one of the next thing that I kind of skipped over on here was one of the proposals that came forward to us from the DOT. They had told us that they were no longer going to spend national highway preservation program funds on our NHS roadways such as Main Avenue, University and 10th, 19th Avenue North, and those types of state-numbered roadways that are on the national highway system. Once we got this sub-allocation, and I disagreed with that pretty vehemently because those are significant roads in our metropolitan area. And so their initial response to that was that they would share about 1% of the NHPP funds that they get annually, which ended up being about 1.8 million. All of you know you don't do much with 1.8 million when it comes to major roadways right now. So adding that to our STBG funds just didn't really make a huge difference. And my feeling was that we would be better off getting those on a project-by-project basis because those projects end up being so costly. And I think our engineers on our Transportation Technical Committee agreed with that. When I brought it forward to Policy Board, there was generally agreement with that. So we pursued another alternative for that with the DOT. And this is just kind of a reminder that the DOT does still intend to use those funds, obviously, on the interstate system. That's their responsibility, and they do have some pretty large investments planned for that system. One of the ones coming up is the interchange of I-29 and County Road 20, or 40th Avenue North. They want to initiate studying an interchange reconstruction there sometime in the next 5 years. But these other roadways that I mentioned are the ones that kind of are at issue, and in fact, West Fargo has one going on right now on Main Avenue with the geotechnical study. So when we looked at how our funding, with that proposal that they gave us, when we looked at our funding and amounts and how it lays out with projects that are already in our transportation improvement program, this for 2023, this showed that we're about, almost even with, maybe just under $1 million, which we know will get eaten up with project costs on at least this Main Avenue project between University and 25th Street. But my issue with this is that the DOT already has over $8 million programmed of NHPP funds for that project. That should free up another approximately $8 million in SCBG funds for our local governments to do a different project. And we need to know what that is, because here we are in June, and that money has to be spent in 2023. Now, we know there are probably some pretty significant maintenance projects, which would be pretty easy to tee up. But we will be working with Fargo and West Fargo and Horace to see what we can, what the priorities are for the use of those funds, assuming now that the DOT is going to continue to use the NHS funds for that project. In 2024, the DOT has a programmed project of the Main Avenue slide repair. So if we do not have to substitute this NHS funding with STBG funds, that's $4 million that would continue to come out of the NHS, and we're already programmed at close to $8 million in STBG, so we would have had to delay some of the expenditure of these funds. It's currently programmed for 32nd Avenue South. So, you know, and we have absolutely no idea if this Main Avenue slide repair cost estimate is even close to being accurate, because it's purely an investigation right now with geotechnical monitoring and that type of thing. So another project in 2025 that really should be moved to the National Highway System funding is the 12th Avenue North Burlington Northern Railroad Bridge at the viaduct. There's about $500,000 of repairs programmed for that bridge, and the DOT put those funds in STBG, but that decision lies with us now, and those funds really should come out of the NHS funding. So as you can see, we're talking about, even just in the next 2 years, 2 to 3 years, we're talking about close to $13 million coming out of that National Highway System funding pot on our non-interstate highways. So, you know, what is the issue? Why is it an issue right now? Because of the timing on this, we are getting very close to entering into a memorandum of understanding with North Dakota DOT, and we have a draft. I know that we'll be wanting to have Mr. Shockley review that, and once we've had a couple opportunities to go through it with North Dakota DOT. And we firmly believe that North Dakota DOT should continue programming those National Highway Preservation Program funds for our NHS roadways to make sure that we can continue to use our Surface Transportation Block Grant funds for city-owned roadways to the greatest extent possible. And up until recently, like I said before, and in the correspondence I sent in your packet, we were told that that would not be the case. Since this has been elevated to a higher level discussion, and we had a meeting with North Dakota DOT, they have told us that we could continue to be part of the state's regional solicitation for the use of those funds on our NHS roadways. And that meeting took place on May 19th. We believe it is their intent to leave those two projects in the TIP using NHPP funds, as I showed you. And in the future, our non-interstate National Highway System roadways can remain part of that regional funding solicitation from the state. It is a bit of a gamble. You know, over 10 years, that 1.8 to 2 million is about 18 million. But like I said, just in the next 2 years, we've got close to 13 million already programmed. So, and you all know, I've heard many comments about 19th Avenue, for example, and the condition that portions of that roadway in. So you all know that there are some pretty big projects that need to be done on some of those roadways. So these are the funding numbers that we're looking at for Surface Transportation Block Grant monies. That, like I said, is going to go up by close to $1 million with the additional obligation authority. And the near-term decisions that we're going to have to make will be how do we use this, this $8+ million. We know Main Avenue is going to be more expensive than we thought, so some of that may need to go toward that project, but that may still leave some additional funding, and we'll be considering that at our TTC and Policy Board meetings. With that, there were some longer-term questions that we also wanted to know. You know, we wanted to know if we did accept that 1.8 million a year in NHPP funds, does that mean in perpetuity that we would be responsible for maintaining our own National Highway System roadways? You know, that was really at the crux of the issue there. And we also asked North Dakota DOT if they've ever considered sharing their congestion management, air quality, CMAQ funds specifically with the urbanized areas, not just Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, Horace, but with Bismarck, Mandan, Grand Forks, in the future Minot, which may end up being designated as an MPO. We're not sure yet. But you know, the purpose of those funds is to improve air quality, and right now they just become part of the state's overall funding picture, because we are not a non-attainment state. We don't have air quality problems that need to be addressed through those funds. So thankfully, we are on a good path with this. Timeliness is important, that we get these questions answered because of the opportunity to use those funds in 2023 and 2024. And we don't need any action from your commission tonight. I had set out to ask for your support, in which you may still obviously choose to give as we work through this. But because the DOT has realized that this is not acceptable to us, they have stepped up and started working with us on this. And so I think they know we have local elected official support behind us, and the director knows as well. So that's all I have. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Gray?
Just a comment that we are the first TMA in North Dakota, so the DOT has a steep learning curve too, on how to handle our new status in all this, and how they're gonna
Right.
hand out the funds or not hand out the funds. We need to make sure we get our funds as we feel we should.
Mr. Simmons?
I think it's kind of scary on my part, because I remember Cindy, before you, just as you were coming on board, I was leaving as the president of MetroCog, and we had these conversations. What would it look like? What would things be like? Would they be different? And I've been here too long, because now we're seeing them. So yeah, it's cool to see all this come around. You know what I mean? It's nice to see it happening. So hopefully it's to our benefit. We were kind of scared back then that maybe it wouldn't be to our benefit. So.
Mayor and Commissioners, it is a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of tracking of projects. It will be really important that we work with our city engineers on project development to make sure projects are ready when the funding is programmed. The DOT has a great track record every year of going back for what they call the August redistribution, where they can get unspent money from other states. And so we will get our portion of that when that happens, but we want to help them successfully apply for that. You don't get those funds unless you are on track to spend the funds that were allocated to you. So we need to be very diligent, and of course we have a much smaller pool of projects, and so we don't have the flexibility like they do across the whole state to slide one project in and juggle things around. So it's going to be a learning curve, and we're all going to have to learn and pay a lot of attention at first, especially, well, always, but especially at first.
So I do have one question. So referring to exactly what you said, Cindy, years ago, we could do that, kind of take unallocated, and we'd work real close with Grand Forks and Bismarck. But now I'm assuming we're in a different category, right, than they are. So, because they're not a TMA. They'll still be an MPO. So can we still allocate those funds between the cities, or are we in a whole separate?
Mayor and Commissioner Simmons, I think I'm not sure, but you may be talking about the consolidated planning grant funds. And that's a separate, that's the funds that we use to operate our own agencies. These are roadway construction dollars. And so we are in a different category than the others, and they will still have to continue going through the state's selection process for their surface transportation block grant, transportation alternative funds. So we'll be in a different category than them, and I don't think the state has any intention, unless there's some particularly special project, I don't think they have any intention of moving more money into our urban area.
Reallocating, kind of.
Right. I can foresee a situation in the future where if we have a huge project where we need to establish some sort of a memorandum of understanding about advanced construction or something like that we can do that. And we've already started talking about that. But, they're not going to be too eager to allocate more construction roadway funds to our urban area, because it will have a significant effect on the amount of money that they have left to spend in the remainder of the state.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else from Ms. Gray? Thank you for sharing.
Okay, thank you.
Do you need any kind of motion from us for a letter or for support of this, or is it just?
If you are of a mind to make a motion to support the direction that we're working with the DOT to make sure that we continue to get the NHPP funds for our NHS roadways, that would be a great motion to have on the record.
I will make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass a resolution supporting the North Dakota DOT funding proposal as presented by Ms. Gray this evening. Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Ms. Gray. Nice to see you. Item number 10 is a resolution directing assessments to be levied. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President and members of the commission. Tonight you have before you 4 resolutions directing the Special Assessment Commission to meet and begin the process of levying special assessments. Those are for districts 1315.2, 1331, 1332, 1330, and 1334. As you'll recall, this is just the first step in the process of directing the Special Assessment Commission to meet and to levy the special assessment costs. It's not actually levying a special assessments, it's merely instructing the Special Assessment Commission to meet and start that process. Just by way of information, the process that the Special Assessment Commission undertakes is to have an initial meeting. These are all public meetings. An initial meeting where they will determine how the special assessment should be levied on individual properties. Then there will be public notice that's multifaceted, both online and in the newspaper, and I believe also some mailers that will notice a public hearing before the Special Assessment Commission where people can come and voice their objections or opinions. And then if they're not satisfied with that, then there will be a hearing before the City Commission regarding the actual amount of specific assessments per individual property. And so this is just the process that initiates that. I would note that these funds have already been spent, and so it's part of the process to make sure that we have revenue sufficient to pay the bonds, which I'm happy to answer any questions, but wanted to emphasize this is just the very first step in the process of starting the assessments, and there will be more than ample public notice of all the meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Any questions for Mr. Shockley, commissioners? Hearing none.
Make a motion to approve?
All 4 of the resolutions?
All 4 of the
Commissioner?
resolutions.
All right. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve and adopt the resolutions for the improvement districts of 1315.2, 1331, 1332, and 1334. Again, resolution directing the assessments to be leveled. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 11 is a revised special assessment policy. Mr. Shockley, City Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President, members of the West Fargo City Commission. Tonight before you have update to the special assessment policy that was originally adopted by the city back in 2016. The first amendment was in June 7th of 2021, and then tonight's proposed amendment. The amendment keeps in place largely all of the public notice requirements that have previously been previously been approved by the city commission. What this amendment does is really address an issue that has developed within the last couple of years due to a good reason. The city has experienced a significant amount of higher density development and a mix of what I would characterize as a few very, very large parcels with very expensive homes on them. And then that's on one bookend. And then the other bookend is very, very high dense development with a lot of apartment units, condos, and commercial properties. And it really had, last year when we were going through the assessment process, it became clear that we needed to update our assessment policy and give some guidance to the Special Assessment Commission on how those assessments would be allocated in a more equitable manner given those two bookends. I would note this policy doesn't change how a single-family residence is treated. So whether you have a single-family residence in Charleswood, a single-family residence in Eagle Run, or in the Wilds, this doesn't change that at all. What this really addresses is those two bookends. And to make it fair, we started out with a concept of the equivalent unit, which is you look at, from a very high level, an equivalent unit is that house that could be in Charleswood, that could be in the Wilds, and that's one equivalent unit. And then we weight that equivalent unit on the basis of what does that mean for an apartment unit? What does that mean for the large properties? And previously, kind of to contrast it, and the real changes to the assessment policy are located on page, and my apologies here. I had this. It is located on pages 205 through 207 of your packet. And previously, and I'll start with apartment buildings because those are probably the easiest to contrast with the old policy. Under the old policy, we looked at the area of the lot and levied an assessment. And that was okay when we didn't have a lot of apartment units or condo units, but now that we have a significant amount of it, the equivalent unit basis is a more appropriate allocation. And so each apartment unit or condo unit would get 0.6 of an equivalent unit. And you may ask, why does an apartment unit or a condo get 0.6 as compared to the house in Charleswood? And the reason, there is a couple reasons. First of all, on an average, and I realize there's outliers, but on an average, typically an apartment unit or a condo has less cars, less children, and less occupants within that unit. There's also a basis for the 0.6 in the engineering guidance for transportation. And so that 0.6 comes right out of that engineering guidance. And so I think there's valid reason for doing that. And you'll see on page 206 of the packet, when we talk about multifamily residences, if you had a 12 unit complex, you'd have 7.2 equivalent units. And 144 units, you'd have 86.4 equivalent units. And this isn't an amount that's being assessed, this is essentially the denominator. How many units do you have within the district? And before, we would assess upon area, and so you might have a very, very dense development that was getting a very similar assessment to an apartment complex that had maybe more units or less units. And so this really becomes a more appropriate and equitable way to assess out those apartment units. It was one of the concerns that I had, as well as city engineering staff, on how are we going to levy these assessments in an equitable manner. And it also addresses some of the residents' questions about how do you assess the buildings like on Cheyenne Street? How is that, there's a large multi-use building that is smack dab in the middle of a residential area. Does my house get the same assessment as that apartment building? The answer is no. But if you look at, is it equivalent? Yes, it is equivalent. Is it fair? Yes, it is fair, because it's based upon the equivalent unit for each of the apartment units or condos that are located within that building. We did add to the policy that for multi-use buildings, using the Sheyenne Plaza and the Pioneer Place as an example, the first floor would be assessed on a commercial basis, and the upper floors that are multifamily are assessed on the multifamily basis. And then the other issue that we were really trying to address is we've, over the years, and that once again, this is a good thing, we've had several large properties that have platted and have had large, very, very expensive homes put on the lots, and you contrast that with a property like a Nelson Acres and trying to make that equivalent. And so we address that on pages 205 through 206. And really, the difference is whether or not, we tried to move somewhat away from, is platting the sole basis for the determination of what that should be assessed. And the city engineer and myself really thought that the best way to look at this is it within an established neighborhood? And an established neighborhood, we included a definition within the policy of an established neighborhood. Is it interconnected? Do they have multiple homes out there? Really, like Nelson Acres would be an established neighborhood. And so on the under the first section, for the first 2 acres, they get one equivalent unit, because in looking across all the properties in the city, most all of those large lots, if vast majority of them are 2 acres and less. And so we thought that captured really keeping it equivalent with the house that's in Charleswood, the house that's in the Wilds, the house that's on any other single-family lot within town. And then as the lot size gets bigger, after it gets past the 2 acres, we started adding equivalent units. The reason that we do that is they're large lots. You get past 2 acres, there is a potential to subdivide those lots. And looking at it equitably, you have a larger lot, you would expect a larger assessment. But at the same time, since it's an established neighborhood, you'll notice that the number of equivalent units that are levied on that lot are slightly different than number 2, where they're platted but not within an established neighborhood. The reason for that is it's the classic, the Grant Farm would be a great example. It's one house that's on 12 acres. It's not platted, it's likely to develop. That's probably got, from an equitable standpoint, a higher likelihood that you'll get more homes there, and long-term it would, or commercial development, it would need a higher number of equivalent units because it would have more demands upon the system. And then on page 3 and 4, we really got into looking at those properties which are unplatted, that have a single-family residence on the lot, trying to treat those very closely to the platted 2-acre lots. And there's a few of those lots, not too many within the city anymore, that are really within those areas that were just annexed by the city, and trying to make that fair so that if you had an unplatted parcel that was 2 acres, that you were getting about the same assessment as a parcel that was platted and had 2 acres or 2.5. And so they're very close. You'll note that there's just a little bit slightly higher, not much, because, and I'll double check that number, just because they are more likely to be able to be platted because they are unplatted. And so we wanted to recognize that. And then the final one was the unplatted without a residence. And that's really truly your development land. And so that has your highest number of equivalent units on it. And so We're recommending the new policy be put in place as we start to get ready to assess out. We're going back through the process of 2250 and some of the other districts. And this is really going to help long-term with, like, when we get down, we don't have to assess right now downtown, but when we do, it really sets a more fair policy dealing with the apartment units. It sets up a more fair policy dealing with the large lots. We feel really confident that's a defendable, equitable policy, and we spent some time looking at it. I can answer any questions, Dustin can answer any questions, but we did spend a significant amount of time working through this specific issue.
My compliments. I spent a great deal of time this afternoon studying this. My one question to you on your various tables that you have, John, you have 6.5 acres. You know, that's not meant to be a cap. There's going to be a continuum of that, whether it's 12.1 acres or whatever. This is the process that we'll follow going forward, right?
Yeah, we were just trying to
Yeah,
set out
I
some
understand.
examples.
Okay. That's what I assumed. Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you. John, did we change any way that we assess the regional roads? In reference to, a while back, we had a problem with Charleswood. They got like assessed for not only 13th, but Cheyenne, and there was a little, are we changing some of that as we're changing this process to make it fair to everybody?
We didn't really address the north-south roads. This was really geared towards the equivalent units. I think there's some challenges with the north-south assessments, and we can certainly, what I would say is we can go back and we can work on that specific issue. What was really pressing was, because we're doing so many assessments in the southern part of the community, we wanted to get this policy right. We can certainly go back and look at the north-south.
That could be for another time, right? You're saying so? Okay.
I was at that special assessment meeting a year ago, or thereabouts, and that was an interesting dialogue that went on with regard to some of these larger property owners, and the only way for them to find resolution to their concerns was to plot the land. And so there was a number of them that had discussions on that. So I think that this is a great effort.
And from,
But to Commissioner Simmons's point, for another day, I think we need to address that too.
and from my standpoint as city attorney, the one concern I had was the lights is a perfect example. With that dense of development, how do you make sure that you have an equitable system to assess those properties versus somebody, that has a house? Because to me, the policy makes sense, because it is likely that the person who owns a single-family house will maybe have one car more or two cars more. They'll have kids at some point in their life, or maybe a larger group of people than somebody that's living in a condo in the lights. But at the same time, that condo still has a, impact upon the system. And so I think this is a better system that will allocate the assessments in a more equitable way.
I think, over the years with assessments, I get we all don't like them. We go through this all the time, Commissioner George, but I still truly believe in my heart that if people understand them and they're fair, that they will have a much better time. Once, as long as we make sure we're transparent and it's fair to everybody, the system. And I think you've done that too. You've cleaned it up, so.
Additional comments?
I'll just agree with everything that's being said. People don't like specials, but you're exactly right. If we have to use them, and this is the system we still are currently using, let's make it as fair as possible, and that's what you've done. So I think you've done a really fantastic job addressing people's concerns. And, it doesn't mean we can't continue to work on other options, but I think, for now, this is great. And then I think also what you're talking about with the north-south roads, for another time, agreed that would be good to continue to work on that in the future.
This is an actionable item because this is the new special assessment policy that will be presented to the Special Assessment Committee, and that would be going forward. That would be their working document. So
I'll make a motion to approve the revised special assessment policy.
thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the revised special assessment policy as presented this evening by Mr. Shockley. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor will please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 12 is to update the ordinance 1212 Liquor Control Board that has been established. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President, members of the commission. This ordinance amendment comes really from a request from the chief of police and then a cleanup regarding the code enforcement official due to some staffing changes. I think, the chief isn't here tonight, but he had some concerns about being a member of the Liquor Control Board and also being tasked with taking enforcement actions against different establishments. And so he requested that the consideration be given to taking the chief of police off and substituting the assistant city administrator in place. And then the code enforcement official is now under the police department. And so we're proposing to put the city planner on the Liquor Control Board. There's not a legal reason to do this. This is purely policy. So it's up to you as a commission how you want to adjust the membership, but this is our proposal.
Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions?
Just a comment, John. I remember when we did this, Tina, when we founded this board, I felt it was a little conflict just because the chief, he gets in a pickle. He can't be on the policy and then, his job is to say, I have to regulate it. So I agree with that one. I don't think, are you clapping over there, Jason? Do you want to be on there? I just think it's a good move. I really do. So I'd make the motion if there's no other comment too.
Commissioner Simmons moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Again, we have a motion and a second to update the ordinance 1212 Liquor Control Board as presented this evening by Mr. Shockley. Is there any further discussion? Mrs. Fisk.
I think all the looking around was, I left the element of surprise that the assistant city administrator and the director of planning were new people on the board. I think they're just excited.
And this is just the first reading, or do we need two readings on this?
It's the first reading.
First reading, okay.
First reading, okay. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 13 is the review the draft ballot language and draft ordinance regarding a half-cent sales tax increase for police and fire. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President, members of the West Fargo City Commission. I've received some comments regarding the proposed official ballot, and the reason I like to do this is just to have you as elected officials review the ballot, because as a city attorney, I don't always see all of the issues that you do when you're have such a close interface with the public. And this is moving forward with adding an additional half-cent to the current 2% sales tax to make it 2.5%, and the additional half-cent would be going to police and fire for equipment, for capital improvements, and for staffing if the voters approved it. One of the comments that I've received thus far is if we could add some instructional language that would make it clear to the voter that by voting yes, you're only increasing the sales tax by 0.5%, you're not increasing it by 2.5%. I can certainly add that and bring that back to the commission at the next meeting so you can see the ballot language so you can finalize it. The actual ordinance itself the change is really, really easy. It's striking out 2 and going to 2.5%, and I'll bring that with the final ballot language. Open to any other comments that you might have as city commissioners.
I have one of the words that you use in your descriptive portion, for police and fire, and you said equipping, and what's the other word you use?
I think
Capital improvements.
capital improvements.
By definition, what is a capital improvement, John?
Typically, a capital improvement is a building, if you had water and sewer lines to the building, but it's typically building the sidewalks around it. We could specify
Could
building.
that be interpreted as new facilities?
Yeah,
Is, my next question then, is that the intent that we want?
My only concern, I think it'd be simpler to say buildings and accessories or whatever, because when you say capital improvements, that should also go under our capital improvement program, and that's gonna confuse people, I
Or
think.
police and fire improvements
Just
only?
only, yeah, that's what, I think with that,
I think that's critical to the discussion with the public.
because we don't wanna go into the CIP. You know, I mean, it will, I'm sure, but I'm saying, we wanna keep those separate, so.
Where these funds are gonna be used, right?
Right, but if you use capital improvements, the mind's gonna say, oh, that's CIP, you know, some people are gonna look at us.
see, yeah,
That's what I'm saying. Leave-
Designated only for fire and police.
Yeah, and buildings and accessories, whatever, you could be, you know,
That's important, I think it's an important point.
But that's not on the actual ballot, is it?
No.
No, it's just in the information, so what you're asking for now is to approve the ballot.
well,
Right.
yeah, tonight I think I'm just asking for input, and then I'll bring back the final form of the ballot. My other question relates to just clarity around the topic of if you want the sales tax to be available to use for staff. So, for example, if payroll, things like that associated with police and fire to reduce the pressure on the mill levy. I think that was my understanding, but just getting clarity from you all if you want that to be included within the ordinance.
Thoughts?
the what now?
For staffing included?
Yeah. Like, could you use the sales tax, the 0.5 cent for, instead of equipment, you would use it to buy down, essentially, quote unquote, buy down the wages?
Are we just talking about this one now, John? Just
Yeah.
this
yeah.
this
Just that-
question?
Just the additional 0.5 cent, if you want that in the ordinance.
To define it so tight that it can only be used this way, that cost something for, Mr. Larson?
Well, I think if we say police and fire, that's pretty much defining it. And if they want to use it for, I mean, it's got to be used for police and fire. I don't think we want to get it too complicated. To me alone, the ballot, because of the way we have our structures and the ordinances, it's already going to be difficult enough for people to understand they have to vote twice for the same thing. It's confusing.
Having drawn some of these up in my previous life, I'm telling you that the public is going to want to have us define the scope of this. If it's too broad, it's going to be frivolous. They're going to interpret it as frivolous spending, and they're going to vote no.
Yeah.
You define the scope of what the intent is. The better job we do of that, I think that we have a better chance of the public finding truth of this.
And you also, because you're submitting it to the voters, if we aren't clear about whether or not you can use it for staff expenditures, somebody could try, and I'm not saying they would, but they could try in a couple of years and say, you can't use it for staff expenditures. And so it'd be better to, if you want to do that, this is a political decision.
But that wouldn't be on the ballot, though. This is in the information you're talking about,
It'll-
right?
It would be in the ordinance, and so
you'd-
somebody
okay.
somebody
How
who
we can
shows up
spend
at
the money.
City
Yeah,
Hall and
right.
wants to look at the
And
draft
that's
ordinance.
what I'm saying is that I believe we have to define the scope of what its intent is. Be honest with the public, be transparent, and then they'll make their decision.
Are we saying, though, with the ballot, though, would we also clarify police and fire on the ballot? Because right now, if I didn't know what we were talking about, I'd be completely clueless on what this is saying. Because it doesn't talk about police, it doesn't talk about fire, it says 2.5%. I'd be like,
This is
no,
Fisk.
what is this?
And Mr. Shockley, I know I asked you this question, but we never got a chance to talk about it. I've seen it on other ballots, but maybe we can't do it, where you put on the ballot, a yes vote means you are in favor of adding a 0.5 cent police and fire safety sales tax, a no vote means you are not.
Yeah, we can
And
add
you
that.
would say like a yes vote on 1 and 2, because they have to agree to both.
I agree. I think we have to have something on it that says police and fire, and the simple, my point was, I think you're right. We have to explain everything very well, but we have to keep this ballot as simplistic as possible. Because people
Simple,
don't
but-
always listen, you know, so like you said, even if somebody's reading it, what do you mean 2.5? They only told us a half cent. I mean, but that's our ordinance, I get it, but a lot of people don't understand that, so.
Yeah, it
That's
doesn't
what we
say
gotta
police or fire, so.
We'll leave that in your capable hands, Mr. Shockley, to bring something back. Thank you.
Thank you for the direction, and I'll bring the revised final ordinance, or final ballot and ordinance to the next city commission meeting for your sign off then.
Commissioners, any other points you want to make? Commissioner
Just a question.
Olson?
Do we need to have the ordinance language already completed before it goes, before the ballot is accepted? I'm just curious.
I would, what we've traditionally done the last sales taxes is we always publish the draft sales tax ordinance a couple weeks before the election. I like to do that because it ties off any issue of somebody saying, I didn't have notice for what the sales tax was going to be used for. And it also gives you as commissioners, you know what the public voted on. There's no question that they voted for the sales tax ordinance that you're going to.
And that's the point I was trying to
Yeah.
make about the scope of it.
Right. Our
That
first
we
priority
have to
area for it.
communicate to the public. They have to be aware of the intricacies of what they're approving.
Would you be making the clarifying language on the first and the second? Because if they have to vote for both, I would think the second one then is different and might say no to that one.
Yeah,
So-
I will add clarifying language
Okay.
to that.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Anything else, Commissioners, for Mr. Shockley? Item number 14 is the City Administrator's Report. Mrs. Fisk?
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. First of all, thank you for running a highly efficient meeting. I thought we'd be here till midnight, so I appreciate it. I only have a couple items. I want to remind everybody of Cruise Night, Thursday, June 16th at 4:30. It's back on downtown Cheyenne Street between Main and 7th, so I'm sure the downtown businesses are extremely excited. Along with the street fair that will take place on June 18th, again, back to downtown, between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. I think the only other thing I have is there's Eggs and Issues tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in Moorhead, and I don't believe there's anything else. Nope, that's all I have. What do you have for me?
Thank you. Anyone have anything for Mrs. Fisk? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any correspondence? You've distributed some correspondence to us. Anything other than those?
Nothing other than the items that Emily gave you. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Commissioners, any non-agenda items you'd like to bring forward? Mi-
I have
Commissioner George?
So I have started conversations with Tina, with Dustin. I've talked to Bernie a little bit as far as childcare. We seem to have a severe lack of childcare accessibility, and I think these are conversations we should be having as a city. I know at the city level we can't solve the problem, but at least maybe we can come up with some solutions or some ideas to help with the issue. To have childcare, get more people back to work. So what I was proposing is maybe we can do some sort of public meeting. I know this is something Wendy likes to have, is public meetings. So I thought maybe with her, Melissa, we could get a date figured out maybe in July or something like that. If people would be open to having the public come in that have concerns in this issue, they could speak on their concerns, speak on ideas, and we could just maybe come up with some ideas to help make the situation better.
Okay, very good. I would highly recommend that we reach out to our local legislators. The primary will be done on the 14th. And I do know that Senator Lee from West Fargo has been working on this through the Health and Human Services, the committee that she chairs. And so I think we should invite those. So if you would be so kind, Commissioner George, you try and figure that all out and what staff members you might include.
Okay.
If you would, please.
Would that be something the rest of the commission would be open to?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Commissioner Olson, you had something also?
Yes, at the last commission meeting, we were given a handout regarding potential cost of living adjustments for city staff. And after looking at, and Mayor, you presented just a 2% starting point. And I've been giving that a lot of thought. And I think that we should bump that to 4%, because if we could have all the funding that we need to do this, but if we don't have staff that will do the job, then we won't be able to provide the services. So I'd like to, take a look at what that would be if we would move that up to a 4% cost of living to start with. Then we can make our adjustments, because in my experience, if you start at 2, it may only be 1. Because I don't know, not too many times where we go from 2 and we jump to 5 or 4 or 3, it rarely goes up. It usually always goes down from the starting point. So that's just my comment and my thoughts.
Mrs. Fisk, have we provided that information to the other commissioners, that data that you provided me?
That table that was given to you at the last commission meeting, I did send it, but if I need to resend it, I'm happy to.
Have you've seen this?
I've seen that,
Okay,
yep.
that's important to me. All right, that's fine. We're, at this time, it's a calculation that's applied to the budgetary process. So there's nothing that we're, signing off on, if you will. So if that's the wishes of the commission this evening, I got 3 additional heads nodding yes.
I think it doesn't hurt to put it in there too, just so that at least you can, we can budget. That's by no means means we're giving it to them. It's
No,
just,
right.
Tina can budget a little bit better.
Mrs. Fisk, would you please do that?
We will take care of that. Thank you.
And in your process, Mr. Larson, Mrs. Fisk, please plug that, and Mr. Scott, please plug that in for discussion purposes at this time.
Yes, we will. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. I think you did we not get 2, 3, and 4 in? Is that what that is? I haven't seen it, but, where you can see all the, I think you sent it to us anyway, didn't you? Or did you
Yeah,
not?
we did between 1 and 10. Mr. Larson
Oh,
prepared the
could I
cost.
get that again? Could you send that to me, please? Thanks. I don't think I'm.
Sure will. Yep.
Just so we got an idea, I guess. I'm fine.
Very good. Are there any other non-agenda items by the commission? Department heads, any non-agenda items that you'd like to address? Hearing and seeing none, Commissioner
I'll
Simmons,
make a motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Olson,
Second.
no discussion. We're adjourned.